Welcome to the Nonprofit411 podcast, the podcast where we speak with nonprofit professionals and experts to uncover strategies, share insights, and tackle the challenges you face in fundraising and sustainability. I'm Sarah Barton, your fundraising growth partner and the founder of Nonprofit411. My mission is to help you develop tailored strategies and support you as you implement them, ensuring your nonprofit thrives. Let's dive into today's episode and learn from the experiences and expertise of those who have been in your shoes. Hello, and welcome to the Nonprofit411 podcast. I'm your host, and I'm joined today by David Rhode, author of Passion Isn't Enough. Welcome.
Sarah, it's so great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yes, I am so excited to have a conversation with you today about your new book, actually. But before we get started, let me ask you my favorite question, which is, what is your favorite hobby?
Sarah, I would have to say I'm a puzzle person. I rediscovered jigsaw puzzles during the pandemic, and I'm also somebody that starts their day with Wordle and connections and strands and spelling bee. I'm one of those people. So I'm a puzzle guy.
Oh, how fun. How fun. My father actually lives with us, and my parents both live with us, and he really enjoys doing jigsaw puzzles. So we do them. What size is your favorite size?
I'm a 1,000-piece guy. I have a puzzle board, which enables me to sort of like move it around our apartment. If I'm in the way, I can be mobile with my puzzle if I need to. So 1,000 pieces is kind of my sweet spot right now.
Wow. Well, I applaud you. We don't make it through very many 1,000-piece puzzles. We did over Christmas. It was a super easy one. And my oldest brother said, you guys can do this one. And he was right. It was really a lot of fun, but generally we're like the 300 to 500 piece.
That's okay. I get it. I get it. There's that's why they make 31 flavors, you know?
That's right. So can you introduce yourself and kind of your background to our listeners today?
Me too. I've been in the nonprofit sector for around 20 years. I entered the sector as a founder. I started an organization called Pitchin' for Baseball and Softball and ran that for about 15 years and loved the ride. And so many of those experiences are baked into the book itself. I then have moved into a couple of different areas, consulting. I consult with two different organizations. One is called PenPAC, which is University of Pennsylvania alumni who do pro bono consulting, and I'm the deputy director of that organization. And then I also have my own consultancy called .org, where I do CEO mentoring and coaching. And I also teach at the University of Pennsylvania. I teach nonprofit branding and nonprofit consulting. So I've got a lot of different angles into the nonprofit sector, and I try to bring that all to bear, both with my clients and also into the book itself.
Yeah. Yes. And I've had a chance to look through the book, and I think it's so well written. I can really see that academic background because you're very thoughtful about how you present the information. And it's so informative, about the various areas a nonprofit needs to be informed about.
I wanted to make it accessible. So to me, if I read a book and a book is intimidating or is up here and I'm down here, then I feel like it's out of reach to me as a reader. And I really wanted this to be something that people literally carry with them or would take and open and just read one particular chapter if they have an interest or maybe a struggle in one aspect of their organization or another. So I really wanted it to be almost a conversation between myself and the executive director and make it something that people can approach easily. I had somebody who read the book. She said, I read it in 24 hours. I'm like, that's a lot of reading. And they're like, no, but it went really fast. Like, I really loved your book. And so that was a big compliment to me that people are finding it flows naturally. The information is in a digestible format, and there's very actionable next steps at the end of each chapter. So people can put the lessons right to work.
Yeah. Yes. All of that is very true. And in fact, I actually flipped over to a couple of areas of interest where, I really talk to nonprofits a lot about these different areas. And I would love to just kind of talk with you, through the podcast about some of these areas and learn from your expertise. One, yeah. One of the areas that I love, as soon as I saw it
I loved it. It was about when you were talking about capacity building boards, that organizations need to move towards capacity building boards. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. I mean, many organizations, there's really two different types of boards. There are working boards and then there are capacity building boards. Sometimes organizations try to have one board achieve both objectives, and that's really um, interesting, but not all that successful of a strategy. Working boards are just that. Board members are asked to take on specific roles and functions within the organization, kind of almost be an extension of the staff. And that may be fine in the beginning for an organization, especially as it's getting off the ground. But for long-term success, the capacity building board to me is the right structure. So board members are asked to and are explained about this in advance of joining the board, that one of the things that they're going to be doing is reaching into their networks to try to help the organization obtain either, financial support. Obviously, that's the most basic kind, but it could be partnerships. It could be corporate partnerships that they know. There could be other relationships that they have. So, engaging board members to help bring people to the organization to share in the passion. And for board members, the simplest way for that to happen is really for them to say, this is an organization that I'm deeply passionate about, and I hope you will support me so that the organization can achieve its results. Because the cliche of people support people, they don't support organizations, really is true. And think about it for yourself, Sarah. If a close friend of yours reached out to you and said, something is really important to me, will you please help me and support it? I think our natural instinct would be to say yes. We'd say, of course, I care about this individual. I would help them in whatever way that I could. And so what we need to do is empower board members and give them the tools and the support so that they feel comfortable going out and bringing in those kind of resources. And maybe just it goes as far as making the introductions, and then the staff takes over the cultivation and making the actual ask in a lot of situations. But we won't get those introductions without the board members' help. And the board member plays a critical role in helping bring the kind of capacity building to the organization that's so critical for them to reach their goals.
Yeah. And I think you make a good point, because a lot of organizations do feel really strongly about having strong, diversification of their board members. So they go out and they're intentionally seeking and finding these board members who have large networks and who have the capacity to really move them into new arenas, but they don't always strategically utilize their boards in that way.
I think it's a function of expectations. So if you come into the organization knowing that that's something that you're going to be asked to do, and we could have, if I'm vetting you as a prospective board member and I say, hey, Sarah, one of the big things we ask our board members to do is to help make introductions to people they know personally and professionally. Have you ever done this before? Is this something you're comfortable with? And people will kind of tell you pretty quickly, yes or no. And it's so much more helpful to have this conversation before they join the organization, because if the answer is no, then you're at a pretty much an impasse. And if that's the case, then you might have a board member who's really underperforming or not performing at all. And is that really fair to the other board members who are being asked to take those same steps? So I think this is all about, clarifying roles and expectations up front, having very what I will call adult conversations about the issue of money, what a give get is for the organization. Making a gift personally to the organization is a requirement, but having maybe a broader fundraising target is also very common. And, let's put it out in the open so that this doesn't become, hey, now that you've been with the organization for 6 months, let me tell you about this fundraising thing. Like, well, that's not fair to the individual, because they want to be successful. They want to meet the expectations you have for them as a board member. So tell them up front what success looks like, and let them work towards it. And you're going to partner with them so that they can be successful both for themselves and for the organization.
Yeah. Yeah. I really appreciate that. And you mentioned there, you talked about partnerships, and that's an area where I feel like organizations um, often have not tapped into enough, right? Building partnerships with corporations and other organizations in their community. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Happy to. Partnership development is an area where I have a lot of enthusiasm and experience. For pitching for baseball, we work closely with equipment manufacturers and a number of Major League Baseball clubs. And it was a really important part of our resource development in terms of financial support, but also in terms of building the profile of us as an organization. We had a few thousand followers on social media. The New York Yankees have a couple million. So
Yeah.
and it doesn't take much math to figure out that when they might put out a positive tweet or some kind of other post about the work we did to support youth in the South Bronx, that was going to elevate us as an organization. So I think the common mistake that organizations make when they think about corporations and partnerships in general is they think about just the biggest companies in their community and let's go after that. And that's fine. I mean, those are normal conversations, but what I propose a slightly different approach. Just think about the organizations that know, love, and trust you the most. And Joe Waters, who's one of the guest contributors to my book, talks about this from his lens. And Joe's one of the experts in partnership development. And he's all over chapter 4 of the book. And so if people know and trust your organization, then they are going to welcome you in to have face-to-face conversation. Conversely, if you're trying to get a meeting with, let's say I'm here in New York City and I want to try to get a meeting with Goldman Sachs, one of the large, investment houses. If I don't know anybody there, why would they give me the time of day? Why would they, just because I'm with a nonprofit organization that's doing good work? There are thousands and thousands of nonprofit organizations in New York City doing good work. So we really have to focus on two things. One is, what is the impact of our work? And does that align with what the corporation cares about? If I'm an arts organization and the bank cares about financial literacy, then there's very little opportunity for us to sort of meet in the middle and sort of build on each other's impact and goals. So we have to start with sort of strategic alignment. Let's make sure what we do is what they care about. Okay, well, that's solvable. And then the next thing, which is a little bit harder sometimes, is trying to get a warm introduction. Who do we know that can make an introduction to somebody at that organization so that we have a chance, a very, very good chance of having that first face-to-face meeting? And so instead of cold calling them or cold emailing them, let's get introduced from somebody that can say, hey, I know these guys are doing really good work. I was hoping that you might be able to find a way to connect and get together to learn a little bit more about what they're doing. In that case, the person in corporate giving or the corporate foundation or whatever is going to most likely say yes, because one of their teammates, potentially an executive, said, hey, this is an organization that you may want to check out. So that gets you from having like a 1 or 2% chance of getting a face-to-face meeting to maybe a 50 or 75% chance of having a face-to-face meeting. So you have to really work hard about getting those introductions so you can get in front of them. And then at least then you can have your day in court. If you're in front of your audience, then you've got a real shot, because then they're going to hear from you and understand what you're all about. And in the book, I go through the kind of questions you might want to ask in that first partnership meeting. I go into a lot of depth about that, but there's a lot of ways to handle that first meeting to get the potential partner, to get them talking and to get them to open up, and for you to learn about how they think, so that you can come back to them with a proposal that's really going to meet the kind of things that they care about and the structure of a partnership arrangement that's going to meet their eye.
Yeah. I want to tell you, I loved that list of questions actually that you had for that first meeting with a potential partner. I actually was like, oh, I need to jot those down. Those are all very good questions. And they were
That's
very
why they're
logically
there.
laid out. Yeah, I do. They were excellent. And I too am really passionate about partnerships, because I have always found them to be very meaningful for the organizations that I've worked with. And it's not hard. I haven't found that partnershiping is really, really hard when you go about it the way that you're talking about, and conversely, it is a very nice gift that you can give organizations to do warm introductions whenever you do know that there's alignment for anything. I do it all the time. If I know someone who has a resource or who has knowledge of or who is working with a similar subject, I will do an email introduction and I will include both of the people on the email. I'll say, you know, Jane, I would like to introduce you to so and so. I've met them through this, and this is something that they're really passionate about. And then to their to the other person in the same email, I will say, I would like to introduce you to this person and this is why. And it's so beautiful to network people like that.
It is. I think we always appreciate when people do things like that for us, and to be able to return that and pay it forward for other people. I think just it gives you a good feeling. It's also it only costs us a teeny bit of our time, but you know, to appreciate and to put ourselves in the shoes of those individuals running small nonprofits, potentially any kind of an introduction like that can be a game changer for them. So, I mean, if that's what you're doing, then you can give yourself a little pat on the back. You did a good deed for the day, but a very meaningful one for the nonprofit. Those kind of introductions, whether it's a prospective board member or prospective partner or prospective donor or anyone, is really valuable, because your credibility or mine or someone else's, that means something, and that will really break down a lot of barriers and allow them to have a chance of working closely together.
Yeah, and there are so many resources in our communities that many times they just don't know about each other. So even if even if they just work similarly, sometimes it can be really nice to have someone who understands exactly where you are and what you're doing. So there's always a great opportunity for that.
I agree.
So
And I mean, that is just, it's the kindness that, sometimes we're a little bit in the world of the nonprofit space, and we uncover things. I mean, I've been at this a long time. I learn about things literally every day. And so, why not share those things with other people?
yes, and you do that in a lovely way in the book. So you actually brought in people and interviewed with them, and you included kind of their experiences and their observations in the book. And so that's kind of how you brought that in. Tell me about that. What was your favorite part about that?
Well, the book enabled me to. There are 22 different nonprofit CEOs and subject matter experts whose wisdom is embedded throughout the book. So you get a lot of me, but you get some of them, and what you really get is all of this cumulative experience, over 450 years of experience in the nonprofit sector between all the folks I talked to. My favorite part about it was just getting to reconnect with some people that have been really important to me. Some people that, when I started my nonprofit organization, were some of the very first people that I connected with. Doug Bauer and Greg Goldman were instructors of mine at the University of Pennsylvania, teaching me about nonprofit fundraising. Doug introduced me to Rich Berlin, who was running at the time Harlem RBI, which is now called We Are Dream, and Rich is in the book. So like, this was a trip down memory lane for me. I was able to go back to people that I had known for a period of time who I look up to, and they were so generous with their time. I guess the best part about it was how excited they were to be part of a resource that was going to help nonprofit leaders. They wanted young and ascending nonprofit leaders and board members to have more tools at their disposal so they could be more effective in their roles. So they were so generous with their time. So that was really touching. And it was a fun part of the book. I had all these great conversations, and I learned things along the way, and then I was able to embed them in the book. It was great.
Yeah, I love that. That's kind of, I've gotten to do that some with my podcast. So it is so much fun to be able to revisit, old past acquaintances and friends and colleagues, and be able to talk to them and glean from them just additional information. I think that I think the timeliness of the book and your ability to be able to, have those conversations is so good, because over the pandemic, we did see some turning over of, the nonprofit sector, especially those that were close to retirement. Maybe they moved into retirement a little bit early, or they moved into retirement and we really didn't get a chance to say goodbye, but they have such valuable resources to offer us because they've experienced a lot of things. And while technology and, all of the changes in our nation and in the sector, they change. There are many things that have been learned before that are still so applicable to everyone in the sector, right?
It's true. I mean, the fundamental reason for the book is that conversations that I was having with CEOs in the nonprofit sector were the same conversations over and over again about strategic planning, about board engagement, about fundraising. It didn't matter what part of the country you were from, what part of the nonprofit sector you were in. These were universal challenges. And so from my perspective, just like you're saying, can we tied together some of those key learnings so that somebody could look at this book and glean from it and sort of have a head start. If they were embarking on strategic planning for the first time, they don't know what they don't know. And so maybe you give them some questions they should ask. How do I know if I should bring in an outside consultant or not to help me through strategic planning? All right, well, I give you a half a dozen considerations that might help lead you in one direction or another. So, or an idea of like what the time frame would be or what the steps are in the process. And again, it's not like I have the answers for strategic planning. There's a lot of wonderful consultants that do great strategic planning work, but at least this is a framework. This is an approach. This is a way to think about it. And the same for board engagement, fundraising, and then the first 15 chapters, which sort of break down different aspects of the work that a CEO is going to have. So I found that the challenges were pretty universal. And from the feedback I'm getting from people that are reading the book, they say like it really hit the mark. So I'm so delighted to hear that because, I invest a lot of time in the book and my greatest hope was that it would be read, it would be helpful. So the fact that people are getting value out of it and is willing to share their views on the book is very flattering, and I'm glad it's being helpful.
Yeah. So you are an instructor. I'm going to shift gears just a little bit. So you're an
Sure.
instructor, and do you teach professionals about nonprofit work? Is that the area that you focus on?
So I teach two different things at the University of Pennsylvania. I teach within the School of Social Policy and Practice. I teach a graduate program in the graduate program there, and I teach nonprofit branding. So I talk a lot about what is a nonprofit brand, how nonprofit brands are different than for-profit brands and things of that nature. And there's a chapter in the book about branding. And we go through a lot of those same concepts. I distill them down. So that's one class that I teach. And then another class that I'm teaching right now is within the business school within Wharton. And I'm teaching executives who are also full-time executives and they're getting their MBA at the same time. And that's a nonprofit consulting class. So they're working in teams to support the nonprofit sector. And at the same time, I'm lecturing to give them a little bit more knowledge about some of the key tenets of being involved with a nonprofit organization. We're focusing a little bit on what it might be to be a nonprofit board member, mostly that focus, but not exclusively. And then I have other guest speakers that come in to share their perspective. Last week, I had a nonprofit founder come in and talk about his journey as a founder because many of my students want to found their own nonprofit organization. So I teach the nonprofit branding side and I do this nonprofit consulting piece. So it's great. It keeps me very fresh and energized and on my toes. So I like teaching. The class I teach in the fall is in person. The class I'm teaching right now is virtual because I have students actually from all around the country. I have students from the West Coast and the East Coast. So the only way we could meet is on Zoom. So that's what we chose to do.
Well, I love that there's some formalization of some nonprofit education being taught. As a person who has worked in nonprofits, I have a master's degree in public administration, and I did some work around nonprofits when I did my master's program. But it is an area that is lacking, often is some of that formalized education just about nonprofit business management, and that it's a little bit different than for profit, and it's a little bit different than the public sector also. And so I love that you have the opportunity to share that with young people or any aged person, actually.
True. True. Yeah. And I'm seeing more nonprofit programs sprout up at the university level. There's some folks that have been at it a long time, but there's new programs that are coming up all the time because nonprofit organizations represent, depending on how you measure, roughly 10% of the economy. And it's an important element of where people might end up landing professionally, and they should have, a good understanding of what it takes to be successful within that environment.
Yeah. And I work with startup nonprofits frequently. And one of the challenges that I see is that as they started this organization, there was so much that they didn't know about the nonprofit as a business model. And so, kind of what is different. So I definitely will be recommending your book, Passion Isn't Enough, for those individuals, because I think that it's a great primer on how to work in and with a nonprofit.
Sarah, I appreciate that. Again, if you think about the premise of the book, passion is not only what brings us into the sector, but so we care deeply about a particular cause or issue, whatever. And many times what that means is we're really focused on the program. What is the thing that our organization is going to do to help a particular population in our community? How can we help them do whatever it is we're trying to do? And that's the lens we might enter the sector with. But if we're a nonprofit executive running that entity, which is a non-for-profit corporation, so it's a business, what does that really mean? It means I have to have a budget. I have to manage the budget. I have to manage people. I have to hire people. I have to have communications that go out. I have to have donors. I have to measure my impact. I have to do all of these things. So it's not just about the program. The program is maybe at the center of the work we do, and it sort of, overlays very closely with the mission, obviously, but that's not sufficient to be successful. You can't just have good programs. You really need all of these pieces of the puzzle kind of rowing in the same direction so that your organization can be sustainable over the long term. And that's the perspective most leaders don't have. I think you're 100% correct. And so by the time they discover that, then they're sort of confronted with things and they're thinking on the fly and maybe using their best instincts. But, I would like to coach them along so they have more confidence and more skill when they encounter something for the first time. And so, hopefully the book can be a mechanism to do that.
Yes, I think it is. And, in my work, I've learned that I can do almost anything if I put my mind to it and my energy, but it is so much easier to do it with someone teaching me along the way. And if I can work with someone who has done it before me, even better, because I'm going to get to success faster, more efficiently, and more effectively than if I try to do it all on my own without a mentor and some guidance.
And learning curves are real things. I mean, and so why start at the bottom of the learning curve? When you can start at the middle of it at least and have a running start and have a better idea of what might be, in the near future, what challenges you might face, what things you need to consider. And then you'll go in with a more thoughtful approach.
Yes. David, can you tell our listeners where they can find you?
The easiest place to find me is on LinkedIn. I'm all over LinkedIn, and they could reach out to me also through my consultancy, which is called .org. So either one is fine. And if they are kind enough to get the book, Passion Isn't Enough, available on Amazon or Barnes & Noble, I'd hope that they could reach out to me and let me know what they thought of it, what they found particularly helpful. And I love to hear from readers, and it's a wonderful way to start a conversation.
Yeah, I hope they do that. And before we exit, what is one piece of information you would like to give any nonprofit professional out there?
I would just say that these are particularly turbulent times, and for nonprofit sector workers, whether we're a staff member or a leader of an organization, I think it's important to kind of focus on the things that we can control and make our programs more efficient, refine them where we can, communicate with our donors, communicate with our staff, communicate with our volunteers, communicate with our partners, remind them of the great work that we're doing. And maybe there's even greater demands now for the work than ever. So you don't have to be asking for money to remind people of the importance of the work you're doing, but focus on what you can control.
Yes, I think that's great advice. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Sarah, thank you for having me. I loved being part of the conversation.
Awesome. To our listeners, I want to thank you for listening. You have a great day. Bye. Feeling the pressure of meeting your nonprofit's fundraising goals? You're not alone. Many nonprofits struggle with limited resources, donor fatigue, and a lack of clear strategy. Nonprofit411 offers personalized coaching to address these challenges head-on. Together, we'll tackle your biggest obstacles, boost your donor relationships, and build momentum toward your mission. Don't let obstacles slow you down. Start your coaching journey today at nonprofit411.org.
That's a wrap for today's episode of Nonprofit 411. I hope our discussion with nonprofit professionals and experts gave you actionable ideas to take your fundraising efforts to the next level. At Nonprofit 411, I partner with leaders like you to develop strategies and guide you through implementation. Visit nonprofit411.org to learn more, and let's take the first step together. See you next time. Bye.